The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, welcome to another CW webinar. I'm Anderson, and this time me and my team will bring you the main highlights of our volume forecast report, second half 2021 update. So, on today's agenda, I will start sharing some information about today's presenter and give you an introduction first of our company, what it is that we do, what we have to offer, and give you some insights of what you can find in our volume forecast report. After this brief introduction, we'll move on to the report's highlights, focusing on a macroeconomic outlook, give you an overview of cement consumption, and leave you with our final remarks, and of course, the answer of today's question. Will regional cement market growth patterns change as a result of the pandemic? So for today's presentation, let me introduce myself, Anderson Teixeira, Junior Business Analyst at CW Group, as well as my colleague Vasco Teixeira, also our Junior Business Analyst, both of us based here in Portugal. Now I will ask you to please bear with me while I give you a brief introduction of our company. So CW is present across three distinct verticals, advisory, research, and media. Under the advisory, CW works with major global consultancies and leading institutions, including the World Bank and Funds and Projects. We provide consulting and advisory expertise on a diverse product portfolio. For example, a recent sample of advisory projects provided include detailed studies on circular economy for MENA and West Africa regions. Other examples also include a complete business process analysis for an online art gallery website. Now, our second branch, the research focus in this branch, CW focus on cement demand globally, as well as detailed industry country reports. We also provide historical and forecast for markets in a variety of products, including one of our main products, the TPR, Trade Prices Report, and the one that we're talking about today, which is the VFR Volume Forecast Report. We also provide commodity price assessment for cement, clinker, patch coke, and coal. And last but not least, under the media umbrella, you can have online access to our vast database. You can subscribe to newsletters for topics of interest, including cement, building materials, paper and pulp, coal, and patch coke. We also have some industry-specific meetings. Fortunately, we are going back to holding in-person conferences, and our next conference is scheduled to be held on the 8th and 9th of December in Mexico. The conference is called Alternative Fuels and Raw Materials Americas 2021, mostly known as AFARMS America. So for more details, please contact our sales team, which email address can be found at the end of our presentation. To provide you a better understanding of what you can expect in our CW volume forecast report, we have the extended version, which is published in November, and a quantitative update that is published in May. Our report includes a global and regional and also country detail analysis of cement production, consumption, net trade, and capacity. We also provide a forecast for 2026, and we have continued with the methodology adopted last year, in which we provide three scenarios. We have our base scenario, and we have two additionals, which are the optimistic and the conservative scenarios to complement our analysis. Here in this map, as you can see, we have the representation of the footprint covered by our VFR report. Of course, it is our constant endeavor to increase our coverage, also depending on the availability and consistency of information. In terms of methodology, the VFR includes the historical annual data on cement consumption, output capacity, and net trade. Our forecasts are made country by country based on past tendencies and macroeconomic data, including GDP and population. Our regional forecast is estimated by the number of sampled markets. Currently, we have 57 markets covered in this edition. And as I mentioned before, we also took as part of this methodology to provide two additional scenarios. Now, I'd like to start actually presenting the webinar with the global economic outlook, so we can start off. So in terms of the global economy, the global economy remains strong. However, dark clouds have surged in the past couple of months, which could heavily impact the outlook. For example, more recently, China's real estate sector is facing considerably financial challenges in terms of repaid debt obligations. For instance, companies including Evergrande, Kaiser Group, Shimao Group, and others, big Chinese companies, are going under extreme debt. Evergrande being the largest of this group of companies, and the bellwether of the direction the industry can go. If goes into default, it will have a huge impact not only on economic growth, but also economic growth in China, but also globally, right? So also more recently, Modi has made 32 negative rating actions in the Chinese property sector in roughly the 4 weeks that ended October 26th. Another risk posed to the economic outlook is the ongoing risk of new variants and still low vaccination rates in low-income countries. More recently, in the October update, the IMF lowered its global growth projection down 1/10 to 5.9% for this year. And this is a result of the impact of supply chain shortages and threats from inflation. For next year, 2022, we have an expected growth of 4.9%, slightly lower than this year. And this is expected due to the consequences of less policy support in developing countries. On the other hand, on a more positive note, the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill passed by the US government more recently should help boost the American economy, therefore positively affecting the global economy as a whole. In our next slide, when we talk about crude oil prices, we see that in October, they have reached an average of $81 per barrel, which was up $10 per barrel from September as a consequence of the growing oil demand and supply constraint. Oil prices have been escalating multi-year highs as shortage of natural gas, LNG, and coal continue to boost demand for oil. This rising in prices, of course, benefits the OPEC plus producers, as these countries are likely to have more additional funding from the oil revenues and use them for the massive infrastructure projects that have been planned. This is include the oil city in Saudi Arabia, and of course other projects amongst these countries. The IEA predicts that restraints on global production and higher demand are likely to continue to contribute to these upward prices pressures in the upcoming months. Now, in terms of the Baltic Exchange Main Sea Freight Rate Index, the Baltic Dry Index, which tracks rates for ships carrying dry bulk commodities. As of November 11, today, it reached 2,861 points, increasing by 56 points. This is being boosted by higher Capesize and Panamax rates. The BDI has been posting a significant drop over the past couple of months compared to trading levels, past couple of weeks, compared to trading levels of October, which reached an average of more than 5,300 points. This decline is mostly due to lower iron ore demand from China, and lower steel output. And in addition to this, more recently, the government in China has been issued nationwide cold wave alarms, which fueled more concerns about traffic disruptions. Therefore, the outlook remains uncertain for the Baltic dry index, as the China's property sectors also started facing challenges caused by the Evergrande crisis. Now, I would like to pass the presentation to my colleague Vasco Teixeira. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wanderson, and hello, everyone. Once again, thank you for joining our webinar. And I will now lead the presentation and go over the main highlights of the volume forecast report for the second half of 2021. So, in this first slide, I would like to go over the global capacity revision from the last version of the VFR. And firstly, I would like to say that we have revised global capacities given economies are rebounding from the effects of the pandemic, which drastically impacted the performance of all major economies, including China, the United States, and the Eurozone. The revision adds 56 million tons of capacity on a global level, with markets such as China, Asia ex-China, and Africa witnessing the biggest additions. Capacities that were postponed last year came online this year due to the dramatic alteration of last year's economic and social scenarios. And consequently, the capacity utilizations are impacted as demand grows from last year. In regards to China, although China's capacity is expected to continue to decline over the forecast period of 2021 and 2026 by a CAGR of a negative 0.2%, there has been an upward revision by 30 million tons of capacity, which was allowed from the government since the last version of the VFR update. In the Asia ex-China region, it is expected to see a total 16 million tons of capacity additions this year. And India and Pakistan are the markets to see the biggest capacity additions from 2021 to 2026 as new players enter these already crowded markets. Also in 2021, the African markets are estimated to be adding a total of 60 million tons of production capacity. And overall, the region is expected to add 43 million tons of capacity between 2021 and 2026, with Nigeria and Morocco being the regional leaders in terms of capacity additions. The Latin American markets are revised to lose around 60 million tons of capacity in 2021, with Brazil being one of the markets to see capacity additions to be pushed back until 2022. On the other hand, the region is estimated to be adding 29 million tons of capacity between 2021 and 2026. And lastly, our current expectation is that the global capacity will rise by around 1% through the period of 2021 to 2026, affected by a reduced rate of capacity elimination in China and continued strong capacity additions in Asia, primarily in the Asia ex-China region. Now, in regards to the global consumption, CW estimates an increase of around 5% in 2021 for both global and global ex-China regions. And the expected growth in 2021 can be attributed to the recovery of the markets from the pandemic and the sustained demand in China, as China managed to contain the pandemic and restart its economy as the world was shutting down last year. Although the US is expected to see modest growth in cement demand this year, it is expected to grow around 2% from 2021 to 2026 on the back of infrastructure projects. Infrastructure projects are expected to see investments in the country by around $1.2 trillion in funds, including $500 billion in new investments for the nation's bridges, airports, waterways, and public transit, which will transform America's infrastructure in the next year and consequently having a very positive effect on sustained demand, cement demand over the next few years. Furthermore, the United States are likely to see additional import volumes from the rest of the world to meet this new demand. In regards to Argentina, demand is expected to rebound from last year, where the country was severely hit by the pandemic. And as of the beginning of 2021, 30 projects were announced worth an estimated $160 million, entailing road and urban infrastructure works. Furthermore, public investment is expected to see 2.2% to represent 2.2% of the GDP in 2021 and grow to 2.4% in 2022. In India, which is the second largest cement market in the world, cement demand is expected to grow around 11% this year on the back of the infrastructure sector and continue to grow until 2026 by a CAGR of around 7%. The Indian government plans to spend around $1.4 trillion on infrastructure alone until 2023 to ensure the country's sustained economic growth. And lastly, Kazakhstan is also expected to see robust cement demand in 2021 and to continue to grow until 2026 by a CAGR of 6%. The construction sector was one of the few sectors that weren't affected by the pandemic, and the sector continued to have a positive performance as of this year. And the cement demand in the country is driven by the infrastructure and road programs. Despite the optimistic expectations of economic recovery in 2021, the emergence of new variants of the coronavirus may reduce the growth prospects if new cases are not brought under control. Now, moving forward to the cement demand comparison between 2020 and 2021, cement demand is expected to grow by 5%, with regions like Asia ex-China, China, and Latin America leading this demand. Firstly, China's cement demand was able to grow last year and is estimated to witness a 5% growth in cement demand as of this year. Latin America, the cement demand grew by around 1% in 2020 and is expected to see robust recovery from last year by around 5%. And the region has seen sustained consumption despite the pandemics in markets such as Brazil, which is growing by 2% in 2021. On the other hand, Western Europe was severely hit by the pandemic since last year, witnessing a decline of 3% in 2020. However, cement demand is set to recover as of this year, even though the region has been hit by several new waves of coronavirus cases. In terms of cement demand in Africa, the region was also hit by last year's pandemic. And in 2021, the region is expected to see growth in cement demand of around 3%. North America, the cement demand is expected to grow by 3% in 2021, and the demand is being driven by the United States, which is estimated to grow by 2.5% this year. And lastly, in regards to the Middle East, cement demand is expected to decline to 2.6% after a bright 3.6% growth last year. And nevertheless, the positive demand of the region in 2021 is sustained by the region's growing economies, as well as a series of projects that needed to be completed for the Dubai Expo and the Qatar World Cup. So in this slide, we present CW's demand outlook complemented by two scenarios, the conservative and the optimistic scenarios. In CW's base case scenario, global cement demand is expected to remain relatively stable as economies continue to recover from the pandemic and governments invest in infrastructure and housing projects. Meanwhile, the conservative scenario takes into account the possibility of China's real estate going bankrupt. And if that happens, China's demand is likely to decline, affecting the global demand, since the market accounts for more than half of the global demand. And that means that even a small decline in China's demand would have a cascading impact on the overall global volumes, and no other single market will be able to make up for the volume impacts of China in the case of the real estate bankruptcy. Furthermore, this scenario also takes into account the possibility of new lockdowns in order to contain cases of vaccine-resistant coronavirus mutations. On the other hand, we have the optimistic scenario, where we believe that not only the $1.2 trillion bill in the United States for infrastructure is likely to create a sustained demand, but also the vaccines will be able to will be made available to emerging and developing countries, and therefore accelerating these countries' economic growth. Now, before closing the presentation, I would like to provide a few closing remarks. Firstly, the global economy is expected to continue to have a robust growth. However, the resurgence of COVID-19 cases poses challenges to this scenario. For instance, Europe and Central Asia continue to have increased number of cases, being the only regions in the world where cases and deaths are rising. Corona cases rose by 7% in the first week of November, while deaths increased by 10% in the same period. And in the United States, the number of COVID-19 cases remains high, while the rest of the world numbers have declined considerably due to the higher vaccination rates. Next, Asia ex-China, Latin America, and China are expected to be the main drivers of global cement demand, with Asia ex-China witnessing a demand growth of 6.9% this year. Western Europe, Africa are set to see a strong demand recovery from the challenges brought by the pandemic, and after declines of 3% and 1% in demand, Western Europe and Africa are expected to recover around 3% each this year. Lastly, total global demand is expected to rebound and grow by more than 5% this year. So now, in order to end this webinar, I would like to thank you one more time for your time and your attention, and see you in our next webinar.